I'd like to thank all the players that have worked real hard on this. It's in the middle of finals, and it's taken up a lot of their time. I'd like to thank them. I'd also like to thank Mark DeRugio and the AV department for everything they've done. Process in music is a systematized series of actions or changes by which sound is produced. These actions can prescribe changes in any or all of the musical parameters: pitch, rhythm, timbre, and loudness. Or the actions themselves, the result of which is sound, can be systematized. The process of cause and effect between actions and sound is a prime compositional concern of composers of process music. The use of processes to compose music is an important 20th century technique. Serial or 12-tone music, the most well-known 20th century compositional system, is based on processing pre-compositionally determined pitch order and its interval relationships. The idea of process, however, can be found much earlier. In 1026, Guido d'Arezzo invented a system in which patterns were substituted for vowels in the sacred songs that he composed. He devised a system whereby one of two possible pitches could be substituted for each vowel. So if one note didn't fit the context of the piece, he could use the other pitch for that particular vowel. In 1719, Mauritius Vogt bent hobnails into different shapes, with each shape representing a particular musical figure. He then threw the nails down and played the musical figures as they led. In 1751, William Hayes, an English composer, satirized inferior Italian composers in his book, The Art of Composing Music by a Method Entirely New and Suited to the Meanest Capacity. In this book, he described the composition of a piece where all one had to do was, quote, take a brush with stiff bristles, dip it in an inkwell, and by scraping a bristle with a finger, splatter in one sweep an entire composition onto the staff paper. You have only to add stems, bar lines, slurs, etc. to make the opus ready for immediate performance. End of quote. All of these historical systems are examples of one type of process composition. A system is invented by which sound is produced in such a way that pitch, duration, rhythmic patterns, or volume will be determined by the system. They are isolated cases and do not represent stylistic trends. Maze number 2 and pendulum music, both of which you will hear performed this afternoon, are examples of this type of process. In Thank You, Guido, I set up a system of pitch substitutions somewhat similar to that of Guido d'Arezzo, but I substituted pitches for the consonants as well as the vowels. The written vowels pitches make up the melody, while the consonant substitutions form the harmony, that is, the two flute parts. Thus, pitch was determined by the process, while I was free to rhythmicize the piece. The text, written by Christopher Kigbo, a Nigerian poet, is divided into couplet groupings. The first line designated crier, the second choir. This is manifested as the tenor voice alone for the first line, and the soprano and flutes making up the second line choir. I tried to reflect the text in some of the rhythmic structures I used. Listen to the rhythm accompanying the words shadow, among the dancers, and mushroom.
go in thunder.
Maze number 2 is designed as a game for musicians. The music is a result of the process of each player finding his way through the maze. Now I realize that you can't see what is in here, but these are little stabs and there are notes with rhythms. The players start at a red square and try and find their way, playing the whole time, trying to reach this red square. If they reach a dead end, they've got to backtrack and find the way again. An earlier version of this piece sounded disparate and unorganized. This was not necessarily unwanted. A maze should sound confused. But I wanted something to hold the piece together, an oral point of repose for both performers and the audience. So at certain designated spots, these colored squares here that you see, the performer is instructed to repeat the content of that square. When the other performers notice he is repeating, they join him in repetition on a different pitch, forming a chord, an oral point of repose. The player's reaction, resulting in a pulsing chord, is my way of injecting control into this primarily uncontrolled piece. The pitch and rhythms, though not their order, are predetermined throughout, while individual tempo, articulation, dynamics, and chord formations are left to be determined by the performers during the playing of the piece. This type of action-reaction among performers is common among improvisational groups, jazz and rock combos, for example, but it is not standard practice among most Western musics. It has been done for centuries by African drummers who play elaborate predetermined patterns in response to musical cues given by the leader, just as jazz and rock players do. Composer Lucas Foss tells us, quote, "Genuine coordination must ultimately be obtained via reaction, that is, via listening and playing accordingly. This requires the performer to use his entire musical being, his eyes to see what he should play, his ears to hear cues which dictate his actions, and his mind to decide how to realize the prescribed actions. Try to picture yourself in a dark labyrinth, lost, trying to find your way out, and being repeatedly stopped by dead ends. major characteristic of the maze piece is its indeterminacy. No two performances of it will be identical because presumably the performers will take a different route to the maze each time. Many composers of modern music, such as John Cage, Morton Feldman, Christian Wolff, and Philip Glass, have used indeterminacy in both the compositional process and in performance realization of their works. More and more responsibility is on the performer as composers write music that is not fully notated and that requires the performer to participate actively in the piece's realization by reacting to cues and by improvising within a given framework. In this piece, the dancers responded to the player's repetition by performing repetitive body movements. The spotlights reacted by changing colors when the music changes. So all the performers are required to react to the music, making this piece totally integrated among the three groups of performers: musicians, dancers, and spotlight operators. Much new music requires a change in the traditional role of the listener. No longer can you be passive. Active participation in the comprehension and organization of the piece is necessary. Each listener's perception and understanding of the piece will be different when he must organize the music in your own mind during its presentation. The music becomes more personal. It's geared so each listener gets something different out of it. And that difference is how his mind organizes the sounds. According to Richard Maxfield, quote, "The final crucial interpretation of any work must take place in the mind of the beholder. All of the skill of the finest artists would be of no avail if the audience had closed and unresponsive minds." This is true of all music, but is particularly true in a special way of gradual process and some modern musics. With all this in mind, active listening on the part of the audience and the way the performers interact, we'll perform Maze number 2 again. Watch and listen to how it is different and how it is the same. advancing technology of our century, many composers are using electronic devices to realize their musical ideas. Much gradual process music, which I'll discuss momentarily, is indigenous to machines. The music that you heard while entering the theater was Robert Fripp and Brian Eno's Wind on Water, which utilizes tape loops, electronic keyboards, and electric guitar. A tape loop is made by attaching the two ends of a piece of recording tape together into a loop, so that whatever sounds are recorded will be repeated indefinitely as a circular piece of tube passes over the playhead again and again. Layers of sound are slowly built on the repetitive loops to form a rhythmic, harmonic background over which the guitar improvises a solo. Listen to the layers building as the loop repeats. Here's the first one, second one, third one, listen again and try and hear all 7 layers as they occur. Then listen to what it sounds like as it repeats. What we have just heard is an example of gradual process music. In this kind of music, very gradual changes take place in some musical parameters, typically time synchronization, pitch, or timbre. The leading composer in this field is Steve Wright, the composer of the next 2 pieces we will hear. He says, quote, "Performing and listening to a gradual musical process resembles placing your feet in the sand by the ocean's edge and watching, listening, and feeling the waves gradually bury them." Quote. This type of gradual process is an example of the second type we shall hear today. That is, the formulation of a means to achieve an intended result, the attainment of which need not be totally determined. This type of process will be demonstrated in the next piece, an electronic piece by Steve Wright called Pendulum Music. The music and the process consist of feedback pulses which result when microphones are swung back and forth over loudspeakers. The score for this is just the instructions to setting up the pendulum system and starting the piece. No score of pulse relationships is given, nor for pitch, nor pulse relationships, pitch, or durations is given, because they cannot be predetermined. Like Mays number 2, this piece will be different with each performance. In pendulum music, the pulses of feedback you will hear will get progressively closer together and longer in duration as the piece runs its course. This work is one with a natural clock. The piece lasts as long as it takes the pendulum to come to rest. As the pendulum swings along at the beginning, the piece will last a long time because it will take more time for the pendulums to decay. Wright writes, quote, "Listening to an extremely gradual musical process opens my ears to it. It always extends further than I can hear. I begin to perceive these minute details when I can sustain attention, and a gradual process invites my sustained attention." Because of the nature of feedback, this work is very loud. Try to ignore the loudness and listen for the changes in pitch and the changing relationships to the patterns that occur as the pendulums swing over the loudspeakers. process pieces take a long time. There are other gradual processes that, like pendulum music, do not have notated scores. Steve Reich has composed works for two identical tape loops played simultaneously on two tape players. Now, because no two tape players play at exactly the same speed, and no two tape loops are exactly the same length, one loop will speed up in relation to the other. You hear one tape slowly moving away from itself. After a while, you don't hear the two tape loops as identical because you hear them interacting and respond to the sounds of both of them, not to the sounds of two tape loops slightly out of phase. Many works indigenous to machines have unnotated scores because the machines perform the piece and no score is necessary. The next piece, also written by Wright, is quite different from pendulum music in that it needs no machines or musical instruments other than a human body to be performed, and it has a score. In clapping music, one pattern is repeated by one group, while another group of clappers starts repeating the same pattern with the first. Oops. No problem. This is a visual representation of clapping music, the next piece that we are going to perform. Both groups start playing the pattern. A group of three, a rest. The first group of two, another rest. A group of one, the second group of two, and another rest. After several repetitions, the first note of the second group's pattern is moved to the end. So this unit is moved over to here. We have this right here, 2, and then the first one goes over here. This sequence is continued until all 12 units have been the first note of the pattern. The cycle is then completed when both groups are together again. So each unit gets to be the first of the pattern. We grow across 5, we get a green, the first unit of the group of 2. We come down, and on the 5th change of the pattern, the green one, the first unit of 2, is the first note. For this piece, I would like the audience to clap the repeating pattern. Could I have house lights, please? That up there is the repeating pattern. It goes like this. Okay, not yet. And it repeats. All of you in the audience are encouraged to join in, but please clap softly because there's going to be a small group of performers up here clapping the repeating pattern, and you won't be able to hear us if you clap loudly. If you clap loudly, your hands will be sore too, I promise you. Let's see if we can do it one more, please. We will repeat the pattern together 8 times before our group moves the first note of the pattern. It's very easy to get off, especially when our group starts playing different patterns. As you clap, notice the patterns move apart gradually. Please feel free to join in, clap softly. Okay? We're going to do it together 8 times, and then we're going to go ahead. All ready? Margaret is going, just in case you get lost. That's awesome. Margaret is going to show you the first note of your pattern by doing this each time it comes around. Okay? Ready? Here we go. We're going to go about this fast. I'll give you 3, I'll stop, and then we'll start. Okay? It's going to be like 1, 2, 3, and then we go. Everybody ready? Okay? so well in clapping music that I'd like you to help me perform March Teal, the next piece. Just repeat this little motive over and over again. Singing. The violins will be playing also. Just count. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. You change notes on 1 and 3. Keep singing. The piano will play at the beginning and then fade out, so you'll be on your own. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. Now let me explain what just happened. This is the only truly experimental piece performed today because I didn't know if the desired result would occur. March Teal was an experiment in the way one musical body can influence another without the latter realizing the former's influence. I devised the piece so the violins would change gradually from the key of D to the key of E flat, hoping that you would do likewise, that is, sing D, F to singing E flat, F. The piece works perfectly, and this gradual tone change, notated precisely in the violins, but left undetermined in your part, was the way I constructed this piece. You are all composers, realizers of the indeterminate in a unique performance of March Teal. Never again will the work be performed exactly as we have done it today. Thank you for making it a success. The third and most well-known type of process is 12-tone, or serial music. Serialization is a process of pitch arrangement in which all 12 notes of the chromatic scale are set into a pattern. For example, a pattern of the 12 notes is devised by the composer, and then he can use them in the original order, backwards, upside down, or upside down and backwards. Now, these methods of transformation have been used by composers for hundreds of years, so that is not new. But using only one pattern as the determinant of all pitch material is a new idea. Now to demonstrate what I just said, here is the upside down version of that row. You can see that the shapes mirror each other. And this inverted gives us the exact same row. Oops, let's see. There, it's the same row. Now, this system of composition was invented by Arnold Schoenberg in the early 1920s in order to assure unity in a piece where traditional tonal principles and procedures are no longer unifying and organizational factors. A row box, that's what this is used to facilitate composition by allowing the composer to see at a glance all possible forms of the row. There are 4 patterns of the row: original, going from here across; retrograde, or backwards, going from right to left; inversion, which is what we just saw, the upside down; and retrograde inversion, or upside down and backwards, which goes this way. The composer can use the row as a melody, build chords out of them, like using the first 4 notes of the row as a chord. Now, these numbers correspond to interval relationships, and what they mean are these notes right here. So he could make a chord using C, E, F, D, or he could use them contrapuntally, say one line against another, each of them being a melodic voice working independently. Rows may have very few different intervals, or they can contain all possible intervals. The row used by Milton Babbitt in Play on Notes, that is this row, has only 24 forms, because the row is constructed so that a row presented frontwards is the same as a row an equal distance from the center presented backwards. Here we've got 0, 4, 5, 2. We go to the bottom, we go backwards, and we have 0, 4, 5, 2. This gives us only 24 possible forms of the row. Play on Notes is organized so that the entire 12-tone row is played in 6 notes. This is the first half of the row. This is the second half. When they're played simultaneously, no pitch is duplicated. The 12-tone row determines only pitch. Octave location is determined by the composer. Some composers, such as Pierre Boulez, Karlheinz Stockhausen, and Milton Babbitt, have extended the system to include rhythm, timbre, and dynamics. In Play on Notes, Babbitt has serialized the text. Every time a word is sung, it is sung on the same pitch, at least in the first section of the piece. The word here is always sung on C. Like the first line of the text is, "Come here and play the notes." Now here can be spelled either H-E-A-R or H-E-R-E. The word note, for example, is always sung on a D, and sometimes it's a noun, other times it's a verb. With the 12-tone process, the possibilities for composition from the same row are limitless. The composer can control rhythm, pitch combinations, instrumentation, phrasing, and pitch class. That is, which D is used when a D is called for. Or the composer can devise a system in which the row itself controls some or all of these things. We would now like to play on notes.
Here, play and note for sound, sound and play for note. Here, note for play and sound, sound for note and play. Here, play and note for sound, sound and play for note. Here, note for play and sound, sound for note and play. Here.
You may be interested to know that Play on Notes appears in a 6th grade music book published by Silver Burdett Publishing. It was composed for performance by 12-year-olds. The fourth and final type of process I will discuss today is the changing of the sound of an instrument by physically altering it. The most common example of this is the use of mutes by horn and trumpet players. 60 years ago, Henry Cowell experimented with the sound produced by placing foreign objects, knives, coins, rubber bands, etc., inside the piano, both on and between the strings. It wasn't until 1938, though, that John Cage refined this technique to make the so-called prepared piano an expressive and truly musical instrument. He invented it as a substitute for a percussion section. At the time, Cage needed a percussion group to work with the dance troupe he was using then, but their rehearsal studio was too small to accommodate one. So he devised his own one-man percussion section by placing objects between the strings of a grand piano. Depending on the materials used and their placements, a wide variety of timbres can be achieved. Thuds, clunks, and buzzes, as well as natural and altered pitches are produced depending on the preparations. The pitch will be altered if the object between the strings stretches them at all. If a metal object is placed midway on the string, a bell-like sound is produced. Different timbres and the number of tones produced also depend on which strings on where in the strings the object is placed. Here's an unaltered F. Now here's an F an octave lower with a bolt between the first and second strings. If the object is between the second and third strings, the sound will be drastically changed. Here's an unaltered F sharp. Now here's an F sharp with a bolt between the second and third strings, played with a soft pedal off. Now each piano key has 3 strings. So when you press down a key, 3 strings are struck. When the damper pedal is on, it shifts the strikers so that only 2 strings are struck. So if you have a metal object between the second and third string with the damper pedal on, the only unaltered string, the first one, is not struck. We'll now hear this. That's with the damper pedal on. Now with the damper pedal off. Did you hear that purer tone? Somewhat. The preparations in John Cage's Fifth Sonata are rubber, bolts, plastic, and furniture bolts. He specified the materials to be used and their exact placement in the strings to within 1/16 of an inch. After hearing the piece, you will understand how a piano can sound like a totally new and different instrument. Only 13 notes are played in this work. Cage's sonata starts with a single musical idea heard over a repeated bass pattern that is 8 notes long. It continues almost uninterrupted throughout the piece. This African-sounding ostinato gives the piece its unity. The fundamental void of soullessness. The soul is then recalled and finally reappears to close the piece. The preparations include rubber, bolts, furniture bolts, screws, plastic, a fork, and a tambourine. After the recital, please feel free to come down and look at the pianos and the materials inside them and play a few notes. It's really interesting to push a key down and hear something totally unexpected, like a thud or a ping. The audience is, quote, put on a bus, their hands stamped with the word listen, and they are taken to and through an existing sound environment, such as a power plant or a subway. Now, when does that piece begin? When they get on the bus? When their hands are stamped? Or when they reach the power plant? And when does it end? When the stamped word listen wears off their hands? Or when they altogether stop listening to the environment? Is it a sound? Then again, is it music? Is music, the word I mean, is that a sound? If it is music music? Is the word music music? Does it communicate anything? Must it? Music, what does it communicate? Is what's clear to me clear to you? Is music just sounds? Then what does it